Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett. And did the San Francisco 49ers make the right choice by hiring Brant Boyer to be their special teams coordinator? Has the team already been looking at a Jake Moody replacement? And are they connected to Joe Flacco this free agency period? You're not going to want to miss anything. Make sure to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on the audio podcasting platforms. Give us that 5-star review. And let's dive into the latest San Francisco 49ers coaching hire. And it is Brant Boyer as the team's special teams coordinator in 2025. Now, this move in itself wasn't surprising because the minute that Robert Saleh got the job in San Francisco, came back, great reunion, whatnot, you immediately thought of, who is he going to poach away from the Jets, his former team? Well, it was pretty obvious it was going to happen because Brant Boyer interviewed immediately after Saleh came to San Francisco for the coordinator job on special teams. And then 4 days after Saleh gets the job, Boyer gets the job. So it wasn't a shock, but a lot of people in general don't know who Brant Boyer is, what he's been doing, and what his experience may have been in the NFL. Now, San Francisco had their eyes on plenty of coordinators out there. Chris Banjo, who I believe will get the Jets job on special teams, talked to him. Talked to Chris Tabor, the former Panthers interim head coach and long time, 30 years of coaching experience at the NFL and collegiate levels on special teams. But they decided to go with Brant Boyer. And when I tell you I love this hire, I mean I love this hire. Now, obviously, we all liked the Brian Schneider hire a couple of years back. And while initially it wasn't that bad, it eventually led to a pretty disastrous unit on special teams for the San Francisco 49ers. But the reason why I love this hire is because you get a very Robert Saleh-like coach, not on defense, now on special teams. And those two units, those two groups are tied hand in hand. Obviously, most defensive players are utilized on special teams. And so you do have some crossover between the two groups. But to give you more background into who Brant Boyer is and may be, he spent 13 years coaching in the NFL on special teams. He started with the Indianapolis Colts in 2012 as an assistant special teams coach, then got the job with the Jets 4 years later in 2016 as their special teams coordinator. Now, most notably, again, he coached with Saleh from 2021 to this past season, 2024. But I do think it's important to point out, when you last from 2016 to 2024, that's a long time. And for the Jets, unfortunately, that's a lot of regime changes, head coaching changes, coordinator changes. They're a mess out there in the Big Apple, and quite frankly, still are. Hoping Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes the best of luck out there. But Brant Boyer was someone that survived 3 different regime changes out there in New York. If that doesn't show you his ability to be a good coach, how to transition from different coordinators and coaches and players and personnel, that's really important when you're bringing somebody into a new place where he has, once again, new GMs, new coaches. And so you do see some tenacity, the ability to kind of transition and maneuver, and this kind of, I guess you can say, moldability to whoever his head coach may be. It's really important to have that. And usually when guys come into new places, they want to fire everybody and clean house. Boyer was one of the lone coordinators to stay throughout 3 different regime changes, and that means a lot to me, at least from the outside looking in, because it tells me that when you do stuff like that, when you are one of the lone survivors, if you will, of regime changes, it shows that you're built for this, that you're so good. This team said, look, we can fire the head coach. We can fire the DC. We can fire other assistants. You're not firing Brant Boyer. He's that good of a coordinator on special teams. Now, to kind of tell you what his experiences may be or how much success he has had with the Jets in his time as their special teams coordinator, it is really easy to overlook this because 2024 was a disaster for the Jets on a variety of levels. Obviously, you fire Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich leaves this offseason, but he was interim head coach. Aaron Rodgers is there, and that's a big disaster in itself. Woody Johnson is out there with Madden rosters, grading players, saying, well, they trade for these guys. Again, quite a mess in New York. And so you have to decide for yourself, are you willing to kind of overlook what this past year was in regards to production of the offense, defense, and special teams? I'm willing to do that because it certainly seems like the outlier. Because this year on special teams in New York, they had 5 different kickers. Now, is that because of Boyer's decision-making or the GM and Joe Douglas? And I don't know. I wasn't out there. I don't follow them very closely, but Boyer's success dates back to 2019 because his teams per DVOA never ranked below 5th. So from 2019 up to 2023, he had a team on special teams that ranked either 5th or higher per DVOA. So this guy's had a consistent top 5 special teams unit in football now. I think once he comes into San Francisco, they're going to want to revamp this group again, get the right guys in the building, similar to how we saw San Francisco do so when they signed George Odom and Oren Burks, who had a phenomenal game against the Commanders in the NFC Championship game last week. And then Ray McLeod got brought in as well. A lot of guys got brought in one fell swoop during one fell off season. I think we're going to see something similar to that this year. Now, it may not be 3, 4, 5 guys, but I think what they're going to do is try to insulate themselves, give them a higher floor on defense. You may not get a higher ceiling, but a higher floor that will ultimately help on special teams and defense, which both go hand in hand. If you aren't very pro DVOA and you want to use EPA, that's fine. Unfortunately for Boyer, it does kind of the results of using that statistic definitely vary for Boyer's success. From 2018 to 2019, so a 2-year sample size, Boyer's special teams unit ranked inside the top 10. So very similar to how DVOA ranked him from 2019 until 2023. However, the past 4 years, funny enough, under Rob Saleh with the Jets, 2021 to 2024, the Jets special teams unit averaged a placement of 17th when it comes to EPA. So a very drastic shift from what DVOA was. Now, those are 2 different analytical things to use and stats to use, but they do kind of give you 2 different results that may have you leaning one way or the other when it comes to how you grade the hiring of Brant Boyer. But when you look at the entire tenure of Boyer with the Jets, forget this era to that era. When you go from 2016 to 2024, his entire time with the Jets, Boyer's unit had a negative 2.62 EPA. That's good for 14th in football. Now, is that very good? It's certainly average, which maybe for someone like myself, you look at that and you go, wow, there are a lot of rebuilding happening in New York for 3 different regimes. And San Francisco, while it isn't rebuilding, there is going to be some retooling, which to me tells me one good thing, that Boyer's units can lift up relatively, I don't want to say poor personnel, but, underwhelming personnel. His units, his coaching can lift them up higher than what they should be. You can also say 14th is average. When you're average, it's not really where you want to be. But then on the flip side again, you can say, well, average compared to 31st is a lot better, which is exactly where San Francisco was this past year with Brian Schneider. And I think, diving more into Boyer's tenure with the Jets, his special teams unit tied for second, in total touchdowns from 2016 to 2024. They had 9 total special teams touchdowns. So they're aggressive. They want to score some points. Whether it's kick returns or block punts or fake punts, they're doing all these things that can make average teams win other games they're not supposed to win. They are making really bad teams, maybe mediocre, and they're also putting over the top really great teams to be being elite. And I think for San Francisco, they're a good team right now. This offseason can push them more close to being great and elite. However, This special teams unit dragged them down so much this past year. And even in previous years, too, in big games, you saw massive mistakes. The Super Bowl being one of those for sure, with the Darrell Luter Jr. McLeod kind of fumble on the punt that led to Kansas City scoring a touchdown, which ultimately was a massive difference in the outcome of that game. You see that Boyer's units over time with the Jets have, I don't want to say been a massive difference maker because the Jets have been ultimately terrible during his entire time there, but they have been a difference maker. They have made an impact that have helped them in many ways and arguably kept them in games. Or take this year, for example, in San Francisco. A blocked punt suffered against the Vikings. Maybe it changes the outcome. Maybe it doesn't, but it certainly doesn't help you in that case. Against the Rams early in the year, a massive punt return by them sets up a game-winning field goal. Just there are two games off the bat where you're just like, seriously, you can go to games they won this past year. The Buccaneers game, the Seahawks game in the middle of the season. Jake Moody misses 3 field goals. Laviska Shenault returns a kick for a touchdown, making that game tighter than it really should have been. So even in games they won, San Francisco special teams unit was so bad where you had to fire Brian Schneider. And I think getting a guy like Brant Boyer in the building, not to say is like the best hire you can certainly have. I think John Fassel, who was with the Cowboys this past year, who I think hired by the Tennessee Titans now this offseason, would have been my first choice. But Boyer's a really good number 2 option to help lift up and hopefully kind of drag this special teams group out of the cellar, which is where it was this past year. During Boyer's time with the Jets, they also have the second most blocked punts, with 8 of them. So again, you see the aggressive style. They're getting in the backfield. They're getting to punters. They're scoring touchdowns. They're also tied for 5th in points scored at 63. And they also, really important here, especially knowing the new kickoff rules, held opponents, to just 21.8 yards per kickoff return. We saw this year how dangerous kickoffs can be. You're even seeing teams in the playoffs struggle to stop kick returns. You're also seeing teams like the Philadelphia Eagles benefit from their units stopping opposing kick returns. Oren Burks again had that massive forced fumble against Keyshawn Nixon against the Packers. You saw games against the Chiefs as well. Like, you're seeing the impact that having a mediocre or at least a good special teams unit can have on teams where, again, Philadelphia against Green Bay, maybe it wasn't the biggest factor in a win, but it certainly set the tone for that game. The very first play of the game, forced fumble by Oren Burks, sets up everything Philadelphia. They score like 3 plays later, and all of a sudden the Packers are on their heels. For San Francisco, while maybe the expectation shouldn't be that, I think it's more about how do you just limit what other teams can do. One of the biggest things we've seen over time, dating back to the playoffs last year against the Packers as well, Chiefs obviously, and others, this team has a hard time just basically covering kickoffs and punts. And I think under Boyer, you should see a massive uptick in the ability to stop where guys are supposed to be, how they're supposed to be coached, which kind of brings me to his coaching style. He is a very hands-on coach. You see a lot of people, and Brian Schneider was this to a certain degree, but he's much more hands-off than Brant Boyer was. Brant Boyer is back there fielding punts with his return men. He's back there holding snaps. He's back there getting involved in the practice, saying, look, I'm going to be, and I'm going to do what I'm asking you to do too. Like, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to help you along the way. Not just going to tell you what to do. I'm going to show you what to do. And you can go through any stage of coaching, whether it's Little League, Pop Warner, high school, college. Players always benefit from not just being told what to do. Sometimes you can tell somebody what to do and they're like, okay, I got it, but they really don't get it. But when you show them what to do, things change. Now, obviously, once you get to the NFL, that diminishes how much it actually impacts and changes things. But I think having a coach similar to Robert Saleh that is involved, will be back there on defense, is yelling, screaming, hyping up his guys, getting involved, it's going to change the energy levels on special teams. I think it'll almost revitalize and kind of, in a way, show and give the unit of field of importance, where under Kyle Shanahan, while not to say he doesn't value it, not to say they don't practice it a lot, because they do. I've been there. They do kicks multiple times a practice. They do punt returns and kick returns multiple times each practice. It's never felt like Kyle truly cares. He really just wants to have somebody over there that doesn't have to worry about. And I think with Boyer, like, Schneider couldn't do that. Schneider couldn't be left alone at his own devices and say, "Hey, lead us," right? When you do that, it gives you Jake Moody. that was Ryan Schneider's guy. He wanted Jake Moody in the building, which has been a disaster. And so I think for Boyer, yes, as Fish and Chips says here, he has an easy job. It can't get worse, so he wins whatever. You're right. To a certain degree, you are correct. You really can't get worse than 31st unless you're falling to 32nd, which at that point, what's the big difference? And so, yes, going from 31st to 26 is a victory, 26 to 14 is a victory. But I do think that, with Boyer in the building now, it impacts other places as well. So San Francisco brings in Robert Saleh and Brant Boyer. And I think what it does on a very basic level is it almost streamlines everything for San Francisco. Shanahan, who has been maybe coy or like, I don't want to deal with special teams, let Schneider deal with it. On defense, same thing, right? So Shanahan loved having Robert Saleh and DeMeco Ryans here because they ran his wide 9, cover 3, cover 4 system that he likes on defense, but also he could trust them. He didn't have to play, helicopter head coach to see what they were doing every single game day and during practices. Whereas under Steve Wilkes and Brian Schneider and Nick Sorensen, he had to. There's a reason why openly for the first time under Kyle Shanahan, you saw him criticize a DC with Steve Wilkes. There's a reason as to why Nick Sorensen got demoted so quickly after this 1 year. And there's a reason as to why you saw Brian Schneider get canned after 3 relatively bad years as on special teams. Like, Shanahan, I think, wants to get back to not having to deal with these things. And by doing so, how do you do that, right? You're bringing guys that know what they're doing and can be trusted. Robert Saleh, former head coach of the Jets, been here in San Francisco for a handful of years before that. There is chemistry. They know what each other wants, and you can trust Robert Saleh to go out there and win you games on defense. Although the chemistry isn't there yet, and maybe there isn't as much familiarity because they haven't been on the same staff before, there is that with Brant Boyer because he has a long, tendered, successful coaching under his belt with the Colts and the Jets. Like, the Jets are a terrible team in themselves, but Brant Boyer was kind of the lone bright spot amongst their coaches, hence why he survived 3 different regime changes. So I think that you are going to see Kyle just getting back to coaching the offense, not having to worry about defense and special teams. And in reverse of that, you now have 2 legitimate coordinators in place alongside Kyle that don't need him to be hovering over them 24/7, questioning them and having to answer questions about them and for them during press conferences. Kyle hates the media. He doesn't like talking to the media. He doesn't like being questioned. We already know this. But I think when you have 2 guys that are confident in themselves, that know what they're doing, you can almost just say, look, I trust Robert and I trust Brant. They're the guys I put in this position for a reason. I don't want to deal with them. You got questions for them, they'll answer it. I think Brian Schneider was okay at that, but you can definitely tell that there were so many holes and cracks in what he was doing as a coach. You were seeing guys on punt returns and punts leaving before the ball's even kicked. And they're the ones standing in front of the punter saying, we got to block some guys. Hence why against the Vikings, a punt gets blocked. So I think that you are going to have this hands-on approach on coaching, this kind of, I guess you could say refocus, if you will, on special teams. And you have a hard-nosed, heavily involved coach now stepping in saying, look, I am going to be, running these practices. I'm going to be in the trenches with you guys. And it's going to make a major difference for, in my mind, a player like Jacob Cowing, young rookies that are trying to, stay on the team or make the team on special teams. Jacob Cowing has so much promise as a return man. And I think when you see how much speed he has, the agility he has, the ability to evade defenders, a lot of that really wasn't seen last year because he was not used as a receiver, and they want to make him a punt returner because he's so dangerous with the ball in his hands. Brant Boyer was a major factor into getting Braxton Berrios either to the Pro Bowl or the special teams. And I already read you, he had 9 touchdowns um, on during his tenure with the Jets as their special teams coordinator. So there's so much success under Brant Boyer. Now, time will tell what comes of that. But I do like the fact that he is kind of this hands-on, loudmouth, wants to get his hands dirty kind of coach. That does change where things were. We had Nick Sorensen really quiet, reserved. Brian Schneider was quiet and reserved. I like that we're seeing this kind of, I don't want to say turning back to the kind of the old school style of coaching. That's not what Shanahan likes, but you are seeing a more aggressive style of coaching on a unit that really desperately needs it. So I like the hire. I do think there is, there was some impact from Robert Saleh, obviously, having known Brant Boyer. And I think we should see that during training camp and OTAs once the media gets out there and sees him for the first time in person. But one of the bigger questions I've been kind of having throughout this entire process about Brant Boyer, who was hired, I think on Monday, or maybe it was earlier or late last week, if you will. Can he save Jake Moody? One of the biggest factors of special teams is making extra points and, field goals. Duh. And there are so many other things as well. Kickoffs were a mess this year too for Moody, not being able to get the ball out of bounds. The onside kicks he has. He was just flustered and really bad all year. In fact, one of the worst kickers in football. And when you talk about Jake Moody, obviously 3rd round pick, the current highest drafted kicker in football right now, the 3rd highest since 2024, had one of the worst field goal percentages in the entire NFL amongst full-time kickers. Can Brant Boyer fix that? Can Brant Boyer get Moody back on track, or really get him on track for the first time in his career? I know Jake gets a lot of crap, and rightfully so. He hasn't been worthy of a 3rd round pick. He hasn't been a kicker that, deserves that 99th overall pick or 101st overall pick label. That said, there's a reason why Jake Moody was so highly touted. There's a reason why the Patriots were planning on picking him in the 4th round. There's a reason as to why San Francisco, for maybe all the fault they certainly have, is there's a reason why they picked Jake Moody. He had a really good collegiate career. He can kick the ball pretty far. He just doesn't have the accuracy. And we do see a lot of young kickers struggle out of the gate and then kind of find themselves later on in their career. And you're hoping that Moody can find it while he's in San Francisco. Now, again, the question is, can that happen? Will that happen? I don't know. I'm just not sure that's the case. Sometimes you just are who you are. Sometimes, you have Robert Aguayos, and sometimes you have Mike Nugents. Very different careers, both highly drafted kickers during their draft classes. So I think that, I think there is some hope for Jake Moody, albeit we did get kind of a hint that San Francisco, I know they talked about bringing in competition, may already be trying to, or I guess, interview replacements for him during the 2025 NFL draft. But first, I want to let you know, if you want to go to a concert, sporting event, or anything else, use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com. You can save yourself $20 off your first purchase. I know myself, I'm going to Japan in March for my honeymoon, and we're trying to get tickets for Dodgers Cubs at the Tokyo Dome. It got sold out real quick, but I tell you what, had I bought them, I would have got them on SeatGeek.com. So if you're going to a concert, going to a sporting event, go to SeatGeek.com and use our promo code to save $20 off your first purchase. Also, a big sponsor news here. Goat Fuel is a new sponsor in the left corner on the screen right for you. A big sponsor for the show as well. And I want to ask you, look, we all love Jerry Rice, right? The greatest player of all time. Well, do you want to perform like the GOAT, Jerry Rice? Then you got to get yourself a can of GOAT Fuel, whether you're an athlete or a normal person like myself who likes some junk food, who just wants to get through his 9 to 5 every single day. GOAT Fuel can bring the best out of every single one of us. And for those of you who want a healthy coffee alternative, click that link down below and grab yourself a can of GOAT Fuel to feel like the greatest of all time. I want to get to some comments here on the YouTube chat. Want to say what's up to Dre Area Sports, Fish and Chips, Niners Throwback, Kawachipto, Benali P. I see all you in here. The great ones also in here. JD Durham's in here. So many of you. Papa J. Here we go. Let's get to some comments here in the YouTube chat. Let's go. See if I can find some of them here. JD Durham says, Jake can't save Mr. Moody. It's going to be an uphill battle. We do know San Francisco plans to bring in some competition. Don't know what that'll be. I know many of you out there don't want them to draft a kicker again. I get it. I would say go for the undrafted guys. Go for a veteran. You don't need to draft one. However, we did get kind of an inkling they're targeting somebody, but I'll get to that in a second. See what else we have here on the YouTube chat. Papa J says here, Sterling, is it really wise to spend a draft pick on a kicker when we can literally find one anywhere around the world? Look, I think if you're drafting in like round 6 and 7, that's fine. I don't think that's a problem. Like San Francisco has 10 draft picks this year. Rounds 1 through 5 really shouldn't be reserved for kickers, albeit San Francisco has unfortunately made a habit of drafting specialists in the 3rd and 4th round under Kyle Shanahan. I think you've seen too many times in the NFL overdrafted kickers come in, some pressure under them, weight of the world on their shoulders, and they struggle and they don't figure things out. And then you have guys like Brandon Aubrey who come out of nowhere, Justin Tucker, who you're like, who's this guy? And they become like one of the greatest kickers of all time. And you're like, he was just sitting there on the scrap heap waiting to get signed and playing soccer in the UFL, whatever it is. So I think for the Niners, I don't think they'll draft a kicker, and they shouldn't. However, I would not be shocked, and I would do this honestly. Bring in 3 dudes. Like, you really got to figure this out next year, because you cannot have Jake Moody kicking in massive games for you. Say the Niners bounce back next year and are in the playoffs, and Jake Moody is out there, and he just is the same guy he has been the last couple seasons, where you can't trust him, and it's a 43-yard field goal, and you're like, Jake has the leg, he has the distance, but it's wide left, and you're like, this has happened 4 or 5 other times this year in pivotal moments. It can't happen. I think there's a good kicker still in Jake Moody. However, I don't think San Francisco has the time to wait for that kicker to come out and make himself known. You got to win now. And if your kicker is one of the reasons you're actively losing, like, look at the Chiefs and all of their wins, or many of their wins. It's on special teams. It's on last-second scoring drives. Mahomes is literally perfect having to score in the playoffs or lose. Like 11 for 11, I think. You want to know why? Because he has somebody like Harrison Butker for the Patriots when they had Tom Brady. Vinatieri was saving a lot of those games for them during a dynasty run in the early 2000s. It pays to have good kickers, and I get San Francisco took a big swing. However, you don't need to draft or overdraft any of these guys to find the right one when it's all said and done. Fish and Chips says here, Moody has an inconsistent plant leg, not good for the NFL. Jake Moody is like the Trey Lance of kickers, right? Oh, the mechanics are off. The mechanics are a little weird now. It isn't the hitching and throwing motion. However, in any sport, basketball, it's your shooting motion. In baseball, it's your swing, it's your pitching mechanics. If you don't have the consistency in your motions and in your shooting formations and what you're doing, it's just not going to work out for you. You're going to have this wild inconsistency in your play, and you're seeing it with Jake Moody. You really are seeing it with Jake Moody. And yes, he was hurt last year. He hurt his ankle. I think he heard it against the Cardinals, like just snapped it on a kick return, which whatever, it happens. Hence why Jake will be back next year. But still, still, you just can't afford to have him out there running around, missing kicks left and right. Fish and chips ads here. Japan should be good. Been there. I loved it. I'd never been there before. I'm super excited to go. Me and my wife did not do our honeymoon after we got married last year in May. Postponed it. We're taking it during her spring break. Hopefully we can see some cherry blossoms and experience Japan for the first time. She loves the culture, loves the food, and I can't wait to go either. We're going to Disneyland out there, and I think Disneyland Sea out there too. So we're going to do all the touristy stuff, ride the bullet trains or whatever. But we're really excited for it, so I'm hoping we love it out there. A lot of our friends have gone, so heard many great things about Japan in recent year. Is goat fuel made of real goats? I cannot confirm or deny that, though. I will say that. Keys says here, what up, Sterling? I like the coaching hires if the Niners invest and rebuild the defense and draft a good offensive lineman. We're good again. I think San Francisco, in an odd way, is kind of blessed by having a down year this season. This draft class is loaded with great edge rushers, interior defensive linemen, really good cornerbacks, a lot of depth at running back if they want to draft one of those. There is some really good guards. However, the depth really isn't there. But there are so many offensive tackles that you can slide in. I know many of them. Membao from Missouri, Will Campbell are two big ones everyone's talking about. Well, you may want to have those guys be tackles. Both those guys can slide in to play the interior, and it only lifts up this guard class even higher. So a lot to like this year. I think San Francisco thus far has made all the right moves. Like they have made almost all the moves you want them to make, they've made. Brought back Saleh. We love Saleh in the Bay Area, albeit it wasn't my first choice. It's still a great move to make. Bring him back. You get in Brant Boyer, and it sets yourself up with $50 million in cap space in free agency. You're going to pay Brock Purdy. You have 10 draft picks. This is almost the perfect year, number 11 overall pick, like almost the perfect year to have a down season. Because what you need, this draft has plenty of it. You have plenty of cap space to spend. You don't have too many guys that need to get paid big money. Only one of them. Greenlaw shouldn't get too much. And you feel comfortable letting guys like Aaron Banks, Hargrave, and even Hufanga leave in free agency. So you're really not tied to too many players. And you could see a revitalization of youth on this roster. But it starts with making the right hires, and San Francisco has done so this year. Let's see what else we got in the YouTube chat. Let's see. Penali P says here, having a reliable kicker also helps the offense in game-winning drive situations. There's reassurance in knowing you only need to get in field goal range versus having to get 6. Now the offense is forcing plays. I agree. I think San Francisco, knowing that you can try to, like, Robbie Gould was such an underrated, consistent weapon for this team, and I get it. He wasn't here for that long when they were really good. However, he had 2019 against the Saints, gets the game-winning field goal out there in New Orleans against the Packers, gets the game-winning field goal. Like, there's so many, pivotal games they've had during this kind of, I don't want to say dynasty, but during this run they've had of success where the kicker has made the plays. I already talked about the Patriots and Tom Brady and Vinatieri, Mahomes and Butker, Jackson and Flacco and Justin Tucker in Baltimore. Like, all those things matter. And so I think that knowing we only have to get to the 33-yard line, the 40-yard line to win a game, it certainly helps. And it shrinks the field knowing that nowadays you can start at the 30, 35 sometimes. And if you get a great kick return, you're at the 40. You only got to go like 30 yards. And in this offense, getting 30 yards, if they're healthy, should be very, very easy. So yes, you are completely correct, Benali. But I do want to get back to the topic of Jake Moody, because we got some tidbits of information that could hint towards a replacement already being discussed in San Francisco. Now, according to Ryan Fowler of the Draft Network, he's down there at the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. He's one of these big college collegiate scouts they have for the Draft Network. He says that the San Francisco 49ers have met with Miami kicker. I hope I get this name right. If I don't, I'm sorry. Andres Borregales. I hope that's correct. Please be right. If I don't, I sound really stupid currently. But Andres Borregales, again, surprised me. It's the first player we've heard San Francisco has talked to and met with in person, which usually it's like, oh, an edge rusher, oh, a D tackle, oh, a linebacker. Nope. In this case, a kicker, which it was like, okay. Now they are one of 10 teams to do so, and there was a big mixed reaction when the news came out. Many people out there were saying, "Good, good, finally." And you're right. I probably butchered his name. You're probably right. But um a big kind of mixed reaction of, yes, get Jake Moody out of here finally. Like, oh my god, he's terrible, he stinks, to, oh my god, they're going to draft a kicker at number 11 in the first round. They're screwed. What are we doing? Kickers? Seriously? And I think you could find the middle ground of like, you can talk to a player, not draft them per se. So I think that, what he's done at Miami, what Borregales has done at Miami. Again, I hope his name is correct. I'm sure it's not, but I hope it is. In his 4 years at Miami, on extra points, 99.5% extra point percentage. It's pretty good. On field goals, a little left to be desired. 86% field goal percentage. Now, I'm not sure what the distances are amongst those, but there's a reason as to why. Like, I didn't look at this as like, oh, they're targeting this guy specifically. I looked at it from a perspective of, it's a kicker. That tells me everything I need to know about San Francisco's plan this year on special teams. You hire Brant Boyer, you bring in a new coordinator, but then on the same thing, you're looking at kickers already. Like you hire Brant Boyer on Monday and you're talking to kickers on Tuesday. Like, I don't think they'll draft a kid now. Didn't think they'd take Jake Moody a couple years ago, but I do think it tells you where the priorities lie for this team when it comes to finding improvements elsewhere. Yes, they'll get edge rushers. Yes, they'll get running backs and receivers and D tackles and linebackers and safeties and cornerbacks. But I do think it's important. They're already kind of looking at, hey, look, we got to find at least some competition for Jake. We have talked so much about insulating running back rooms and quarterback rooms. Unfortunately for San Francisco, they kind of have to insulate the kicker room, which is unfortunate, but it's where they're at with how bad Jake Moody has been. Now, maybe he bounces back, who knows? But I think just knowing the fact they have already been talking to kickers at the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl, like that to me indicates they are going to bring somebody else in. Could be this kid, Borregales, if that's his name. It could be somebody else too, but it's a good indicator that they are going to want to improve this kicker room this year. They have to. They just have to. Now, that brings us to, I don't want to say the biggest news of the day, because I don't think it is that. However, it's probably the most like notable, I guess you can say cover-worthy news, if you will. It's on the thumbnail for a reason. That is the rumors of Joe Flacco and the San Francisco 49ers being connected. Now, during this time of pre-free agency, a lot of opinions are out there. PFF puts out, oh, this team and this team makes sense for this, XYZ free agent. Like today, for example, PFF said that the Niners made sense for Carlton Davis III and DJ Reed, both cornerbacks for the Lions and Jets. Now, both are good players. Just not sure if San Francisco makes sense for either one of them. However, there's always these opinions and, oh, I've heard this and I've heard that, especially when you get like thousands of people, hundreds of scouts and reporters in the same room, on the same sideline. People talk, plenty of times during this time of the year, during the draft time period, you have, drunk GMs and drunk assistants out there at the bars doing the bar walks, talking to people they're not supposed to be talking to. Rumors slip out and things happen. However, Tony Pauline for Sportskeeda, one of the more inconsistent reporters, if you will, on the market. I like Tony. I think sometimes he hits, sometimes he misses. Unfortunately, usually he misses. However, he also was one of the reporters that said San Francisco was eyeing Isaac Guerrero kind of before everybody else was. You can put together, wide zone running back, big body guy, has some speed, makes sense in Shanahan's system. But he was the first one that was like, they want him, they love him, they're going to take him. Now, this past week at the Shrine Bowl, he said that the San Francisco 49ers were one of three teams that are interested or going to be looking at Joe Flacco as a quarterback on the backup market this season. Now, when I heard that, I said, okay, I like Joe Flacco. I know for San Francisco 49er fans who are old enough to remember, Flacco has been kind of a thorn in our side in the Super Bowl. But, I'm not against it. I like Joe Flacco. I think Flacco makes some sense. As as Fish and Chips says here, he's super against it. He says, Flacco, no more talk, no. Whereas Benali P says, Niners to exercise their Flacco demons. So there is a mixed kind of response to Joe Flacco and the Niners being in the same, I guess you can say, conversation or kind of being linked together this offseason. Now, there are some drawbacks to Joe Flacco. He is going to be 40 years old this year, but he has said he wants to play, so that's good. He's going into his 18th year in the NFL. Now, I'm only 28 years old, so I remember watching Joe Flacco when he was at Delaware, right? And they were doing like the ESPN college like skills challenge where, back in the day they used to go, which quarterback can throw the furthest? And I had no idea who Joe Flacco was. And he was flinging that sucker like 80 yards in the air. I was like, man, this is a, down bad looking Jamarcus Russell. And this guy has an arm on him. Oh my goodness. And so like immediately caught my eye. I didn't think he'd be much. I was like 11 years old when it happened. However, fast forward a couple of years, he's playing San Francisco in the Super Bowl when he beats us. That said, when you're 40 years old and you're playing in the NFL, you have to ask, how much exactly. Flacco was in college when I was 6. He's been playing forever. He's an old man. He's like the Aaron Rodgers era of quarterback currently, which, funny enough, when Brady kind of like did not go on this, when Brady had that kind of decade-long stint of not winning a Super Bowl, that's when your Big Bens and your Joe Flaccos and your Matt Schaubs took the lead in the AFC. And obviously Peyton Manning was involved in that stretch as well. But, Flacco in previous years, his career kind of died. Like he was with the Jets and like nothing was really happening with him once he left the Ravens. However, he had an incredible season in 2023 with the Browns when Watson got hurt, and I think it was like Jeff Driscoll got hurt. He comes in, saves their season. Him and Amari Cooper go, ape, they go berserk on the entire AFC. They go to the playoffs. They lose in the first round, which, the Texans were on fire that year. But then he goes to the Colts this past year and only plays 6 games. The Colts themselves were really indecisive as to what to do with Anthony Richardson. I know he kind of quit on them for a quarter or two. Is weird. Like it was a weird circumstance for Joe Flacco to be in. However, in 6 games, threw for over 1,700 yards, had 12 touchdowns. They only won 2 of his 6 games that he played, but Joe Flacco really wasn't a major problem in those games. That said, he does have that gunslinger mentality. He wants to throw the football. He wants to drop back and sling that sucker. He is someone that still has the arm that he had when he was 22 coming out of Delaware. Now, He's 40, not the exact same guy, but he does have that mentality still of, look, my arm can win us some football games. And he's right. Joe Flacco can still sling the rock. But then you have to ask yourself this too. You can have Joe Flacco, who's 40 years old, who is in the twilight of his career, who is kind of just a stick in the mud, can't move very well, but he can facilitate the offense. He can also push the ball downfield a little bit, still at the age of 40. Or you can have Brandon Allen again. Personally, I would say give me Joe Flacco. I think he can give you a little more than Brandon Allen could, but then there's the Joshua Dobbs conversation to have. I like Joshua Dobbs. I don't know why he didn't start against the Packers. I don't know why there was this reluctancy to start him when Purdy got hurt. I don't know why he didn't win the job out of camp. Now, we talked about during that time, Allen gives you the middle of the game. Oh, Purdy gets hurt. He can step in and just kind of keep you afloat. Whereas Dobbs gives you a more roller coaster ride, really good highs and really low lows, which was seen against the Cardinals in Week 18. A couple touchdowns, but also a couple turnovers. Now, whatever, but I'd rather have Flacco than Brandon Allen, and I have a feeling that Joshua Dobbs isn't going to want to return to San Francisco. I could very well see the Colts signing Joshua Dobbs. I can very well see that the Steelers re-signing him back, to their quarterback 2 role when they decide between Fields or Russell Wilson. So I don't think that Joshua Dobbs comes back, hence why Flacco becomes a leading candidate for the job if Tony Pauline's report is to be true. Now, to give some of you out there that are saying, no, don't bring in Joe Flacco. No, he's 40. No, he can't move. No. I will say this, that according to Pro Football Focus, Joe Flacco in 2024 had the 23rd highest passer grade. Now, I get it. PFF, it's not perfect, right? PFF is not perfect. Some metrics are good. They're a baseline. They can kind of steer you in the right direction, but it really isn't what you should always follow when it comes to grading a player or kind of determining how you feel about that player. But I think in this case, it does give you an example as to how much Flacco can offer this team. So again, last year, in just 6 games amongst the entire NFL, he was the 23rd highest passer when it comes to his grade. Okay, well, there's 32 starting quarterbacks in football. Purdy's obviously your quarterback 1, but if Joe Flacco is a 23rd, even if he is the 30th ranked passer in football, that's better than Joshua Dobbs and Brandon Allen from a strictly passer-related conversation. Now, you bring in mobility, which J.D. Durham says here. Flacco, no line, no thanks. And I totally get that, right? San Francisco, whether it is Brock Purdy or Joe Flacco or Joshua Dobbs, should be improving the offensive line no matter what. In fact, you have to. Banks is probably gone. Brendel was absolutely dog crap last year. You like Dominic Pooney a lot. McKivitz is fine. You got to find more pieces, though. Whether it's a Kelvin Banks or a Will Campbell or an Armand Membau or other guys, a Wyatt Millum. There's so many other guys in the draft and free agency. I think it's Drew Dahlman, the center from the Falcons. Like, there are some pieces to point to and look at and say, hey, we can find other areas to improve. And I think once you do that, even with Purdy playing as a starter, if you have Flacco behind the offensive line that's improved, well, then we're having this, okay, this makes more sense. Now, the good thing is San Francisco has to improve the offensive line no matter what. So I think it doesn't lend to the idea that Flacco shouldn't come because of the offensive line, because San Francisco strictly has to improve it no matter what in 2025. I see your comment, Robbie. I'll get to it in 1 second here on the YouTube chat, but I do want to finish my point here about Joe Flacco. The arm talent is still there. Last year with the Colts, Joe Flacco had 8 big-time throws. Now, what that means is, and this is PFF's definition, A big time throw is a pass with excellent ball location and timing, generally thrown down the field further in a tight window. Essentially, it's a ball downfield with good coverage that you fit that sucker into. He had 8 of those. It's a pretty good number for a backup quarterback. When it comes to his average depth of target, it was 9.2. Also really good. All that to say, the arm talent is still there for Joe Flacco. And I think in this offense that once Purdy, if he gets hurt again, fingers crossed he doesn't, it kind of reverts back into this, facilitate, drop back, quick stuff. Deebo, McCaffrey, Kittle, like you don't have to drop back 7 steps. It's like, boom, one read here. Flacco has the arm talent to do that at a really high level still. And because he has that big arm, he can also toss that sucker downfield that doesn't make your offense, it doesn't limit what you can do offensively. Is he fast? No. Is he mobile? Not a chance. But the arm talent is good enough that I think he would elevate this team more than Brandon Allen could, or to a certain degree, Joshua Dobbs did last year in his one start against the Cardinals. Now, then you kind of start to compare mobility and contract stuff together. But I do think it is worth mentioning this as well, that San Francisco, back in 2021, brought Joe Flacco in for a visit. They didn't sign him, but that was pre-drafting Trey Lance. It was when Jimmy Garoppolo was there, which kind of makes me think that the idea was to then trade Jimmy, get Trey, whoever they're going to draft, and have Flacco be the quarterback too. I think it is worth noting that this isn't the first time they've, at least been linked to him. In previous years, there was more serious talks between the two, but I think it is worth noting they have been linked to him in previous seasons as a backup quarterback option. But Robbie, I see your comment here. He asks, Sterling, when do you think a Brock Purdy extension gets done? It's a good question because Purdy has indicated that he wants that thing done quickly. San Francisco often lets these things linger. I have a feeling that they're not going to handle this much differently than other things. I think that San Francisco has their methods. Brock knows he's getting paid. I think that it's going to happen post-draft. I think you could see it sometime in May or June, kind of like that pre-OTA period, the involuntary workouts, or you can see it kind of during the break in between OTAs and minicamp. I don't think it happens in March. I don't think it happens during the draft. I think you hear about it, and I hope I'm wrong here. I want that thing done quickly. But I think we hear about it closer to, May, June, July, maybe, closer to the summer dates of everybody kind of rejoining, coming back together for the 2025 next season. Lori Matthews says here, I wouldn't mind Flacco as a vet in the room and keep Tanner Mordecai. Mordecai is one of the more intriguing options. Now, Mordecai, 5-year college player, over 10,000 passing yards in college. We saw him in the preseason. Mobility is there. He looked fine. You have to wonder, would you feel comfortable with Tanner Mordecai being this team's sole backup quarterback next year? I wouldn't. I think that in a team that, where it's really important, every game matters in the NFL. You can be 8-9 or 9-8 and still make it in. I think this year showed you that, had they had a better backup quarterback, maybe it mattered, maybe it didn't. But we've seen in previous years, this team has been able to save their seasons with backup quarterbacks. I don't think Tanner Mordecai is that kind of player. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am. But I'd rather have Flacco over Mordecai in that room. And sure, have both. That's fine. But a lot of people are saying just Tanner Mordecai. And I don't think that's what I would want to do. In fact, I would be really scared if that was the case, unless Mordecai takes this crazy leap, which if he does, awesome, but still not what I'd want. Fish and Chips says here, Flacco will get the nickname Sacco behind the offensive line. Is the Sacco the trophy they give the loser in the league? I tell you what, you never want to be a Sacco, ever, ever want to be a Sacco. Never. um, let's see what we have here on the YouTube chat as well. Benali P says Joe Flacco in Hail Mary situations, the way the Commanders use Mariota exclusively for quarterback sneaks. Hey, Purdy doesn't have the greatest arm. You can get a little bit more, I guess you can try tricky with the quarterback room if you have Flacco back there tossing that sucker 70 yards downfield still at 40 yards. Imagine this. Joe Flacco's one pass attempt all year is like a week 18 Hail Mary in the back of the end zone. Brandon Aiyuk comes back, catches the ball. His one pass like a 65-yard Hail Mary that then pushes San Francisco into the playoffs. Obviously, that's never going to happen, but that would be insane to happen. But again, to your point, Benali, having that bigger-bodied, bigger-armed quarterback can help on a team that has had Brandon Allen and Joshua Dobbs be the backup quarterbacks this past year. Benali P says, didn't they extend Jimmy in February? I don't remember off the top of my head, and my phone's in the other room, but it's been a long time. It's been a long time. Maybe they did, and I've forgotten, but I'm not sure. However, I just think that they know that Brock is like a done deal in a way. Like, they know it's going to happen. They know that he's not going anywhere. Whereas Jimmy was a free agent. Like, the reason why Jimmy's got done in February, if that's the case, which just makes sense now, was because the new league year started in March. They did not want him hitting the open market. They said, get this thing done, get Jimmy in here now, announce this sucker. So I think that if, which I think is right, if that happened during February, that's why. Whereas Brock, like, he's still under contract with the team and isn't going anywhere. But of everything they've done this offseason, which has been very little thus far, firing Brian Schneider, Nick Sorensen leaves, bringing in Saleh, bringing in Brant Boyer, I really, really like what they've done. I don't love it, but I think it's a phenomenal first step. You now have good coaching that can handle themselves, and you're hearing small tidbits of, look, going after a kicker at the Shrine Bowl. Joe Flacco, you never know. I just think the vibes are so much better. To where we ended and where things were during the season, it's like, whew, breath of fresh air. You know, the only thing that can hurt San Francisco, and this is dependent on who you're rooting for in 2 Sundays in the Super Bowl, is either Philadelphia winning or KC winning. And honestly, I can care less. It don't matter to me. But like, they have like, you can honestly say, maybe outside of Ben Johnson, because usually offensive coaches can change cultures and the outcomes of games more than defenses can. I think San Francisco has won the coaching carousel. Like, the Saints have lost, the Jaguars, I think, have lost. The Jets, we'll see what they're in Glenn. They brought in Steve Wilkes. We'll see what happens with them. They don't have an OC yet, I believe. The Niners have brought in, 2 of the bigger names out there. Raiders got Pete Carroll, certainly a win for them. But I think that Saleh and Boyer are kind of this, really good 2-headed piece to bring in here and revamp this team. And hopefully just get back to playing, Niners defense. And hopefully having an improved special teams to a point where you're like, hey, we won this game because of special teams. It is one of the most overlooked things in all sports when it comes to football, and it is needs to be a focus point, a focal point of kind of helping San Francisco turn things around in 2025. Fish and Chips asks here, is Kyle looking for Saleh to save his job? Usually someone saves it for him every so often. I mean, you could argue that Brock saved their jobs because Trey Lance was a bust. That's kind of the only time I can think of. I mean, honestly, you can argue the Jaguars' incompetence, and then I guess you can say then them coming to their own kind of realizing Trent Baalke's terrible also saved them from not missing out on Robert Saleh. So I don't think it's that. I don't think Kyle brought in Saleh to save his job. I think it's more so of like, we have a window now. Sorensen was bad. You're really good. You want to come back for a year or two? I think that's basically what it is. And to say that Deebo saved his job in 2021, I'm assuming, uh, sure, like Deebo was great that year. I wouldn't say that's so much Deebo saving his job. I think that's more about, you know, they they're coming off of a terrible 2020 year, had a lot of injuries that year, I believe. They kind of clawed their way back. Jimmy was hurt often, and there was disputes behind the scenes to get Trey Lance. There was so much going on. I don't think Deebo saved Kyle's job. I think that Deebo was great, and a lot of that has to do with Kyle utilizing him a lot. So it kind of goes hand in hand. But yes, Deebo was great in 2021. I don't think he saved Kyle's job, though. I don't think even if they were bad in 2021, I don't think that Kyle would have lost his job, because then they would have been good in 2022 as well. So I won't say that. Like, Kyle was not on the verge of getting fired after 2020. It just wasn't the case. But. Yeah. Yeah. Lori Matthews says here, Deebo was just the player that carried them that season. You're right. Fish and Chips responds and says, Deebo, I've got your back. Many other instances also. I just think, like, I'm not gonna, knock Kyle for his players playing well in his system, in his offense. Now, yes, so Kyle has his faults for sure, but I think a lot of it is they get along well. Deebo knows that really wouldn't have been Deebo Samuel outside of Kyle's. Like, Deebo was kind of the first Deebo. There was Cordell Patterson, who was utilized in a running back way and was kind of a kick returner with the Vikings and the Bears and whatnot. But Deebo was like the first Deebo. I guess Percy Harvin as well. But like, in this era of football, like, it was Deebo Samuel, whereas everybody else is wanting the next Deebo. Treylon Burks, Malachi Corley, Laviska Shenault. Everyone was looking for the next Deebo for a while. But, yes, we all want 2021 Deebo back. Kyle drafted Deebo, developed Deebo, played Deebo. Kyle gets credit for Deebo. Yeah, I mean, Kyle had to see what Deebo can do in 2019. That draft class was so good. Bosa, Deebo, Greenlaw, man. And yes, have a glass of wine. Do a little drinking. You're going to be okay. The season's over with now. You can look back and say, man, what a terrible year, but we are turning the chapter, turning the page to 2025. And I cannot wait for it to happen. One final comment by Rob here on the YouTube chat. Going back to Brock Purdy, it would be smart to extend him before free agency to see exactly what the cap situation to plug some more holes. I would agree. However, I think San Francisco has already budgeted for Brock Purdy's contract. I agree with you, though. You want to get it done fast. Get that done and see what you have left. Don't kind of limit yourself as to what you can do and then go, okay, thank God we have enough, or oh my God, we have to, pivot and extend Kittle and Warner and Deebo to make room for Purdy. You want to get Purdy done first, then pivot, not vice versa. So I'd agree with you. But I just think San Francisco does things their own way. And I don't think even a franchise quarterback changes that. I really don't. But we also saw them pay Lenore during the year, so maybe it's changing. I hope it's changing, but I'm just not sure it is. But I want to say thank you to all of you in the YouTube chat. Benali P, Lori Matthews, Fish and Chips, he's getting the IPA, Robbie439, Papa J, Dre Area Sports, so many more of you up in here as well. If I can get all your keys, JD Durham, again, so many more great ones, 765. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for commenting and listening. If you can on the way out, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you also can, follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. Use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Also, don't forget to buy some goat fuel with the link down below. You can be like a goat. You can be like Jerry Rice. Support the show and buy some goat fuel in the comments and description down below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that 5-star review. My name is Sterling Bennett, and as always, until next time, stay faithful.